Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching discussion today with me, Rajat Kane. In this episode, we'll discuss a Supreme Court judgment raising the doctrine of indirect discrimination and the need to address it so as to achieve an equitable society. The two-judge bench of Supreme Court, presided by Justice Dhanajay Chandrachud and Justice M.R. Shah, introduced the concept of indirect discrimination criterion in Indian jurisprudence to reinforce the principle of equality and non-discrimination guaranteed by our Constitution. Well, this concept was introduced in case relating to 86 women short service commission officers demanding equality in application of standards for grant of permanent commission. The court, in its judgment, declared the criteria adopted by Indian Army as arbitrary and irrational and underlined that in order to achieve equality as prescribed in our Constitution, discrimination, direct or indirect, should be prohibited. So how far will this judgment go in achieving the target of equality and prohibiting the discrimination in society at large? To discuss further on this issue, we're joined with a panel of two guests. Well, many thanks for joining us, Captain Anubha Rathore. She is defense expert, and Rekha Agrawal, she is Advocate Supreme Court. Ma'am, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you, Captain Rathore. Your first reaction on the Supreme Court two-bench judgment, of course, that was confined to a short service commission of women in the army, but it has larger ramifications. Ma'am.
It is a very, very historical judgment, very welcomed. We'd been waiting for it, fighting for it for quite some time, and it is just the beginning.
Right. Well, there we have Captain Rathore giving a very short, precise and clear answer that it's just the beginning. Advocate Rekha Agrawal, besides giving judgment in the matter, the Supreme Court also introduced, or rather reinforced, the concept of prohibiting indirect discrimination. Well, how important is this underlining by Supreme Court in this regard?
I think it is a landmark judgment, and as Captain Rathore rightly said, that it is a step in the right direction. It is a very good beginning, because despite the fact that the Constitution of India does not differentiate between men and women in any circumstances, whether based upon sex, color, caste, religion, creed, etc. And it guarantees equality to all men and all women who are citizens of the country. But the fact remains, and one cannot ignore that fact, that despite this concept of equality, what is most glaring is the inequality which is prevalent in every sphere, particularly when there's discrimination based on gender. And the 86 army officers who had challenged their prohibition from getting incorporated into the permanent commission jobs, they had challenged the criteria on which they were debarred from getting these permanent commission jobs, despite the fact that they were more than amply qualified. And it is in this case that the Supreme Court has passed a very historical judgment where they have gone into the patriarchal mindset, which is ruling the test for deciding whether a woman is qualified for joining as for being selected as permanent commission or not. Because in this case, when these women officers had knocked the doors of the Supreme Court, they were complaining not of direct discrimination, but of indirect discrimination, which is a very nascent concept of jurisprudence which has yet to be established in the Indian concept.
Absolutely nascent, and it's yet to be established, but it's beginning nonetheless. Well, Captain Rathore, we need to understand from you, being an expert in defense, what exactly this fight was all about. I'm sure this was beyond just these 86 women officers.
Absolutely. I would say that it was a step taken by these 86 officers who went to the court, who knocked the doors of the court. But what about others who were capable, who could have been permanent commissioned officers with respect to their, the qualifications, the work they have done. But since they did not go to the court, that doesn't mean that they were not, qualified to become permanent. So it is a good step which these officers have taken. And definitely the indirect discrimination which has come to, we are listening for the first time, which is very, very subtle. Like at the face of it, you don't realize that there is a discrimination, because it is said that, okay, you are considered for permanency, okay, you are considered for filing an application to join the army, but where inside the system it is happening, that I have proven myself several times. The court has already named these 26 lady officers who have done exceptionally well. But they are not aware that why they have not been given permanent commission. So the court has really very subtly, it has put that it is by the male for the male. The mindset has to change. That is why I said it is just the beginning. Past 70 years, we have had a male dominated army in India. So it is just the beginning, that you must realize that women are equally qualified, they equally work hard, so they should be given their due. And which is, of course, it is duly, it is claim that they are making is very rightful.
Right. Captain Rathore, before we broad-based discussion and talk further about the legal nuances here, just one last question about the case. In terms of the criterion followed by the Indian Army thus far, of course, what is the standpoint of giving permanent commission to non-commissioned officers?
See, the thing is that firstly, of course, when they started inducting women, it was that they are only for the short, they are, being selected or being appointed as a special entry scheme for short service. Later, when it came that they can be given a permanent commission or their services can be extended. Now, on what criteria, which was not disclosed? Yes, we know that there are certain things, there are certain criteria which are followed in the army for becoming a person or a officer permanent. They were not very transparent where lady officers were concerned. They were not very open. There was suddenly you have a list where you are given that, okay, you get a permanent commission, you do not get a permanent commission. Whereas the criteria are not there. If I'm doing well in all my courses, in all my postings, I'm getting a good ACR, then as a lady officer, I'm at loss that why I am not getting a permanent commission. So this area needs to be addressed. This is what I feel. If you really want women to come into the army, and if you really want it a place where there are no biases, these questions have to be addressed.
Right. Stay on, Captain Anubha Rathore. Many thanks for giving a perspective on this and, of course, like giving insight as to the rules of commissioning in the army. Advocate Agrawal here, let's broad-base this discussion. I mean, we of course started with discussing a case-specific issue, but the doctrine which Supreme Court underlined itself is fairly vast. Now, in society, we have seen several instances whereby the disadvantaged or disadvantageous section society remain adrift from, say, getting equality. So how far, when courts get active in redefining or defining these statutes will help them?
You put a very valid question, because this particular instance where there's discrimination in the Indian Army regarding permanent commission to women is only one of the cases that has come to the Supreme Court. But there are cases galore. Very recently, there was the case of Navtej Johar, who had also knocked the courts of the doors of the Supreme Court, wherein he had, the challenge was to the indirect discrimination which members of the LGBTQ society were facing, which was not in terms of direct discrimination, but indirect discrimination. So Supreme Court in this judgment of the permanent commission officers, who challenged the bias that they were facing in being absorbed for permanent commission, has now pointed out that if we go to our historical background, of the Indian jurisprudence, there have been very few cases where the concept of indirect discrimination has been challenged directly. Only very, in passing, it has been discussed by some of the high courts, for example, the Bombay High Court, and in a few passing judgments of the Supreme Court, just like I mentioned about the Navtej Johar case, which was a very recent case, and where ultimately, if they were consenting adults and they were indulging into a relationship, in a private relationship, which was consensual, but between people of the LGBT community. That has been totally condoned by the Supreme Court by saying that this was a case in which there was indirect discrimination written large on the face of the record, and therefore it should be stopped. But besides that, there have been, the Indian jurisprudence has not really gone into cases where there has been indirect discrimination against women, on the basis of gender. So I do think that now with the Supreme Court in this case of the Indian Army officers, now they have paved the path where I think more and more cases of indirect discrimination will come to the fore. For example, the Supreme Court has very clearly said, even in this case of the army officers, that the stand of the center, the stand of the government, that itself was absolutely patriarchal, and the mindset, and it showed that the argument that it had given, for debarring women from being absorbed in permanent commission was of physiological limitations. The argument that was given is that the women cannot be absorbed for permanent commission only because of the physiological limitations. The word physiological limitation itself speaks that, that your argument is based on sex stereotypes and gender discrimination, which cannot be permitted in the Constitution. It is a patriarchal mindset. You are ignoring, while talking of physiological norms, you're ignoring their other achievements. For example, other achievements in the field of sports. All these women officers, they have done so well in the area of sports, but all those criterion have been totally ignored because women are not supposed to probably excel in sports. That is not supposed to be an important asset or important achievement made by them. So I think that with this judgment, which has just been passed by the Honorable Supreme Court, the scenario of the Indian jurisprudence is going to change totally, and all laws and all actions of the government are now going to be tested on the touchstone of equality and gender discrimination.
Right. Captain Rathore, you also believe that in days to come, any action of the government, or for that matter, any particular agencies or enterprises, even private sector, they would be tested on this touchstone of indirect discrimination, or, in terms of need to prohibit it?
This is actually, it has opened a wide, arena.
Right.
Because as the Supreme Court also mentioned, that Honorable Supreme Court, that it seems harmless. At the face of it, it seems harmless. Yes. Whereas it is not. If you go deep into it, and especially the party which is aggrieved, will say that it is not, it is not that harmless. It really harms. It is really, biased, which is against the law. So then a fair chance should be given. See, that way, there are hundreds of men, thousands of men who are not, cannot join army because certain criteria or the other criteria they lack. Similarly, just putting a physical, aspect that women cannot join or cannot be given permanent commission on the basis of physical. How about women excelling in the field of, sports, in the field of so many expedition where army has taken women and they have done well? So I think it is just an excuse putting this thing that, okay, physically women are not as tough as men are. There are hundreds of men who are not as tough as men who are in the army. So it is very, very, lame excuse. This is what I feel. And it is a very, very good judgment for all the women who are working out there in, whatever field of work they are doing. It is really, really, I'm sure it is going to give them a lot of strength, a lot of, faith in the justice or our system, that in future they can always, and I'm sure the policy makers of various, offices, they would also consider this now that, okay, this is a path where women or anybody who's facing this kind of indirect, discrimination can go to the court of law. And I'm sure in future it is going to be a part of law where the reference can be drawn.
Right. Advocate Agrawal, here, when we talk about the disempowered section, we often come across, there is a thought that comes to our mind. One of the founding principles of a constitution happens to be parens patrias. That means whenever there is a disempowered, disadvantageous, or a citizen of the state, of the republic, who is not able to defend himself or herself, it's the state's onus and responsibility to talk for them, to be their voice. So somewhere, has the state not lived up to the responsibility, which is why we have now judiciary taking up this stand here?
Yes, that is indeed a very nice question that you have asked me, because this is a very delicate situation when it comes to the honorable courts, because often the courts are criticized for what is called judicial activism, that the courts are stepping into the realm of the executive. But yes, the courts cannot be a mood spectator to the injustices which are being meted out to the citizens of the country, whether directly or indirectly. So, in fact, these are all the jobs of the executive. If the executive was active and protecting its citizens, there would be no need for the judiciary to interfere into an area in which it is not supposed to interfere. But as I just said, the court cannot be a silent spectator or a mood spectator to what is going on. And therefore, in fact, there are many cases where the court suo moto takes cognizance of something which is going wrong in the country,
right.
whenever there is a violation of those fundamental rights, which are the most important rights that we enjoy in a democratic country. The privilege of being an Indian citizen is that we are guaranteed some fundamental rights under the Constitution of India. So whenever there is a violation of those rights, for example, equality, for example, we feel if women or any underprivileged section of the society, why only women? Whether it is women or children or even men for that matter.
Yes,
so if there's any bias or any, it's not as if women only face bias or only the underprivileged face bias. We can very often have a male also who comes to the courts and who becomes a victim of any kind of discrimination. So we are all equal in the eyes of law. That is what Article 14 says. At the same time, Article 15 of the Constitution also says that if discrimination is used in a positive way, that can be encouraged as long as it uplifts the weaker sections of the society, the underprivileged sections of the society. So I think that had the executive been active enough, there would have been no need for the courts, for the judiciary to intervene. But yes, if the executive is not going to do its work, then the court will have to step in. Whether there's a criticism of judicial over-enthusiasm, over-activism, etc., that can be kept on the side. That is not important. What is to be ensured is that the fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution are actually guaranteed in letter and spirit, not just on paper.
Right. Right, that's important. That's important that the fundamental rights that's guaranteed to in the Constitution, of course, are there to be enforced. And of course, it's a responsibility of the executives at the first place. And then, of course, if there is any lacuna or for that matter, those rights are not being enforced, then the courts kick in. Well, Captain Rathore, I know we're talking about a case whereby you have raised, whereby the issue was discrepancies in the rules. Now, if we talk in more theoretical terms here, in past few decades, how much of enthusiasm among women you have seen in terms of joining the armed forces, be it Army, Air Force, Navy, or even the Central Armed Paramilitary Forces?
See, the women, they are enthusiastic, but they want more clarity.
Okay.
If you really want good quality to come, there has to be clarity.
Okay.
It cannot be you are suddenly left in lurch that after 10 years serving, putting your hard work, your youth, your everything, your education, your qualification, and suddenly you are left in lurch. You don't know what to do, so you are not at an age where you retire and sit back. So then this kind of judgment, which is very, very welcome, and I'm sure it is going to inspire a lot of ladies who are already very inspired by the forces. So this gives, I'm sure it is going to give a better army or better armed forces to India.
Right. Advocate Agrawal, I have a same question to you. Like we have seen as in past decades, a lot of ladies, a lot of women folk have joined our armed forces and even the services here. Now, judgments such as these, and as we are discussing, all three of us are at parity, it will go a long way in achieving a larger good of equality. What do you think? Do we see more women now participating or rather joining forces?
Definitely, Rajat. As Captain Rathore rightly said, that there should be a certain clarity, a certain guarantee.
Right.
Any woman or any man for that matter, who takes upon any career, whether it is the legal profession or whether it is media, since you're a part of the media yourself, Rajat, any profession, whether it is a teaching job, or whether it is an office job or a corporate job, any person who takes upon a career, he is looking at the larger picture. He or she is looking at a certain guarantee where he can ultimately, hang up his boots at the end of his career. That I have achieved, this is what I wanted to achieve. And I have been able to achieve that, and there have been no obstructions or hindrances on my way,
right.
Especially on the basis of my gender. So, yes, now I do feel that, this particular judgment which has been passed by the Honorable Supreme Court, in fact, even last year it had been passed, but despite the judgment of February last year, when we were seeing that it was not given effect to in letter and spirit, and if there is not going to be any transparency, in your rising up your career graph, and if you're going to face the stereotypes of sex or gender, and they're going to face bias because of that. As Justice Chandrachud said in this judgment, that in the case of the permanent commission officers, controversy in the Supreme Court, that the board was sitting there not to select them, but to reject them. So if that stereotype is always there, whether it is in the army, in the armed forces, or in any other career, women particularly are going to get discouraged. They're going to feel that, okay, why should I put in all my life and energy, my youth, and then at the end when I'm thinking of retiring, and having achieved a particular goal, I am going to be, told to sit back because yes, you're a woman officer. You cannot achieve so much and no further. So I think that when all these things are clarified, that certainly if you have the merit, if you have the talent, you are not going to face any discrimination, but you have to prove your mettle. At the same time, if you're a woman, if you're a lady officer, you should not be given a certain privilege to rise ahead. Right. You have to be treated equally to men. We women are certainly not seeking any favors, whether it is in the legal system, whether it is in the media, or whether it is in the judiciary. Despite the fact that the number of lady judges, in the high courts and in the Supreme Court now, Justice Indu Malhotra has recently retired. And there are very few judges in the Honorable Supreme Court. Just 2 lady judges are there in the Honorable Supreme Court after Justice Indu Malhotra's retirement. So there's so many vacancies which are still there in the high courts and the Supreme Court and even in the lower judiciary. So if this clarity is there, that yes, a lady judge who joins at the lowest rung, if she joins as a metropolitan magistrate or as a civil judge, there are chances of her going up right to the Supreme Court, or she has a chances of becoming whatever she wants to do, which is the the zenith of her career she can achieve, and she's not going to face any bias. I think judgments like these should be welcomed, and they are certainly going to give a lot of clarity to women, and who will be certain that if I take up a career, if I take up a particular job, I am going to rise up to the top, provided I have the mettle. I must have the mettle for it. We don't want any favors. That's very clear.
Right. Absolutely. So there we have these 2 lady panelists here who are just elucidating on Supreme Court judgment, also at the same time reiterating that of course, like judgments such as this will go a long way in addressing the issue of lack of parity and of course like giving representation to the disadvantageous section, be it on the basis of gender or be it on the basis of other societal norm. Ma'am, many thanks for joining us. Advocate Rekha Agrawal, many thanks for joining us. Captain Rathore, and of course like this taking part in this discussion. Well, to our viewers, many thanks for joining us and watching this edition of Discussion Today. Thanks for watching Sansad TV. Thank you. Goodbye.